Sylvia Bruce, and I'm a This Can Happen ambassador, and I'm delighted to be joined by my fellow ambassadors, Emily, Harpreet, Dawn, to the second in our In Conversation With series. The conversation areas I'd like to cover is: why is mental health important to business? How well understood is mental health as an enabler of business, and the role of an organisation's culture with regard to mental health. So perhaps if we kick off with why is mental health important to business? I have some thoughts around that, but I wondered if any of Dawn, Harpreet or Emily may have some thoughts around that before I share what my opinion of that is.
I mean, I think the point about mental health is it's a measure of, I think, your capacity and ability to use your brain on the day-to-day. And the measure of your mental health is somebody with very good mental health gets to use 100% of their capacity, their brain, in whatever they happen to be doing at that point, even if that's multitasking. And to have poor mental health, or to have mental health issues which are not addressed and resolved, and you feel there's something to do with them, by necessity, you're taking up brain power, you're taking up your ability to think clearly, your ability to operate clearly, your ability to even to be physical. You know, your brain controls your physical movements. So from a workplace perspective, if you don't deal with that, if you don't have a holistic approach to good mental health, well, frankly, you're not getting the best out of the people in your business, a very mercenary thing. But also there's the human factor. You know, businesses are social organisms as much as places to produce. And if you're not taking that seriously, all you're going to have is a miserable workplace, and you're not going to get the best out of people. So there's always a business reason for thinking about good mental health, in my view.
I love that idea of a social organism, not just around business. Dawn, I think you had something to say, didn't you?
I completely agree with what Emily's just talked about. I think for me there are two parts to it. So I think it's only in the last few years when I really feel that businesses have understood the connection between performance and mental health. So I think up until, the last 3 years, certainly based on my own experience, I think there's been a real disconnect between somebody suffering with their mental health versus the performance that line managers and, people see on a day-to-day basis. I think, businesses have an obligation to show that duty of care to their workforce and associates, to just make sure that, I think to Emily's point, you're only going to get the best out of people, whether that's, the softer side or the performance results driven business KPIs, etc., if people are in a really good place and they feel supported with their own well-being.
Yeah, I unashamedly adopt the mantra that my first ever boss many moons ago, he used to say, a happy crew is a productive crew. And I unashamedly adopted that throughout my career. And it's just one thing that, and I think just as a gentle reminder for perhaps those watching this, is that we are talking mental health. The definition from the World Health Organization, I'll just read it here so I get it word for word. Mental health is not just the absence of mental disorder. It is defined as a state of well-being in which every individual realizes their own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and able to make a contribution to their community and enable sound decision-making and informed choices. So as you can see there, when we talk about mental health, we're not talking depression, anxiety, PTSD. I think a lot of the time we have mental health up here as an umbrella. We have good, positive, whatever phrase you want to use at this end, and we have poor disorders at the other. And we fluctuate along that. And at the negative end, for want of a better phrase, just FYI, under the DSM-5 and the ICD-11, which is coming in next year, there's roughly 160 different disorders. So we're not talking those today, we're talking about mental health. So in terms of looking at that definition, mental health really, as to both your points, is how we function on a daily basis. How we think, feel, behave, our behaviour, our mood, our character, our personality, our temperament. To Emily's point about it can affect our physical health too. and our mental functionality, our physiology, really, how we turn up, our communication, our verbal and non-verbal communication, our decision making, problem solving, creativity, innovation, productivity, our confidence, our resilience. I like to call that bounce back ability. It's really how we manage change, how the uncertainty, the unknown, and the pandemic's been a fantastic, in a weird way, example of that. But the ripple effect of that if our mental health starts to deteriorate, all those things that Emily has said, Dawn has said, and I've just shared there, can start to deteriorate too. And just, you know, Emily and both you were saying it's from the society and humanitarian level, but from a business level, I just quote some stats. And these are pre-pandemic figures. Poor mental health costs the UK employers 33 to 42 billion pounds a year. Over half of that's from presenteeism. You know, we're not fully functioning, as Emily was talking about earlier. It costs the government 24 to 27 billion, and that includes costs of providing benefits, falls in tax revenues. And the shocker for me is that it costs the UK economy between 74 and 99 billion pounds a year, and that's more than the two combined. And what's even more shocking is that's 4/5 of the annual NHS total budget in 2016 and 2017. So think how much more we could do with education, care, everything, if we didn't have to pay out that much in the poor mental health costs. And 91 billion days are lost per annum to mental ill health. And I know the suicide is very dear to all our hearts, and particularly, you know, a couple of the other ambassadors who aren't here today. In 2018, roughly 7,000 people took their own lives in the UK. That's 1 every 1.25 hours. And the shocker for me personally is it's roughly 800,000 people a year take their life globally, and that's 1 every 40 seconds. So my brain can't compute how many may have passed since we started talking. So we have costs on many levels, and if those don't shake people that still don't get it, I don't quite know what else will. But thinking about all those things, then how well understood then is mental health as an enabler of business performance, productivity, and value creation? What do you think around sort of that idea?
Yes, if I can chip in on that. Yeah. So just kind of coming back to what Emily said, there's one point where she said using your brain day to day. And I always think about, you know, the difference between jobs now and, let's say, my parents' generation or their parents' generation. And it was very sort of more of a labor jobs that they did using their body. Not to say they didn't use their brain. Obviously, they had to. But they didn't have to think too much, because a lot of it became very sort of almost robotic. You know, you get that muscle memory. You just do the same thing in and out. And yeah, it took a toll on their body. But I would like to think that their mind was a little more freer than, let's say, mine is now. And I worked those type of labor jobs when I first started. When I was about 16, I just wanted to make money. And so I got any old job, you know, lifting and shifting things and whatnot. And now I get paid a lot better. You know, I have a lot more opportunities in work. But I sometimes think, was I happier then? You know, when I literally had to just lift a box, put it on a pallet and take that pallet somewhere. And a part of me thinks, yeah, perhaps I was, because I didn't have to think so much. Whereas now we have to use our brain on a day to day. And the key difference between a sort of mental health issues and physical health issues is when you have a physical health issue, let's say I was to hurt my leg, break my ankle. If I kept a positive mindset, it could speed the recovery and make it quite decent. If I have issues with my mental health, you know, it's a lot difficult to have that positive mindset when you're going through things like anxiety, stress, depression, because, you know, the thing that you need to get you through it is the very thing that is struggling. Right. So coming back to the point that the question actually, which was about business performance, I think we can all vouch for it now. When we're in a good place, we perform. You know, I work in sales. I speak to customers on a daily basis. If I'm having a sort of a series of anxiety attacks, how likely is it that I'm going to pick up the phone, really drive those sales, speak to people, right? And I think the bank really recognizes that. especially working for NatWest. So if I was to say to my manager or, you know, the head of the department, look, I'm struggling a little bit here, they will put provisions in place. And I love to say that every workplace was like that, but, you know, speak to a lot of friends and families, we know it's not. You know, some people are working in places where you just have to perform no matter what. And that almost, for me, feels like the old days where it was sort of exploitation of labor. So even if you're exploiting somebody mentally, it's no different to exploiting somebody physically as well. And so there is definitely a connection between how well your mind is and performance and productivity. And you mentioned the value of creation as well. Mm-hmm. So, you know, everybody, to be creative, you have to be in a good mind space. Like when we go see friends and families, if I'm not feeling very well, you know, I've got loads of friends that want to pick out the board games and, like, you know, Cluedo and whatnot, something that requires a bit of wit and improv. And sometimes I'm really good at it, but sometimes I'm hopeless. And that's all to do with my mental health. So if you want people to be more creative, which you need in a world that's forever changing, you really have to take the mental health seriously.
That's brilliant, Harpreet. I love the idea of playing board games and not being as good as them as you would normally be. How about
I want to play Cluedo with Harpreet now.
I know, yeah.
I think there is a danger in businesses sometimes to compartmentalize how they address mental health of their employees, and it can get pigeonholed into HR or people function. It can get pigeonholed into occupational health, and I think that does a disservice. I think there's a much more of a horizontal across the entirety of a business, and I know this is something, Sylvia, we've talked about before.
Yes.
But you know, one of my specialisms in my day job is risk management. It's project risk management. Buy my books. But it is about risk management. It's about thinking holistically across your business. What is the impact of, you know, your employees' poor mental health? Is that all the responsibility of occupational health or the people team, or, you know, once a year doing, you know, mental health week and having a few seminars in? It's not. It becomes everyone's responsibility. It becomes everyone's responsibility to lift each other, you know, on a human level, lifting up the people who work for you, the people you work for. You know, that's a really important thing. Sometimes look at your boss. I've got a great team who see my bad days. They lift me up and I lift them up. And I think you have to look across the horizontals, because if you compartmentalize it, it becomes a single issue. It becomes that person has got poor mental health, that person is depressed, that person is not capable, that person is not delivering. That's not the lens I think it's useful to look through, because, you know, I don't care who it is, everyone, as we said before, will have mental health along a spectrum during their life. Some people will get to the very depths of poor mental health. You know, we've talked about some of us getting to that darkest of places. And some people will experience the highs of brilliant mental health, those days where you feel, you know, completely unconquerable. You know, you could do anything. If an organization doesn't respect the fact that people are going to move up that spectrum, and sometimes rapidly, you know, day to day, and take that as a responsibility across every department, every person within an organization, it will not be effective. That is just fact. That is a risk management fact. If you want to put your risk factors in there, run a Monte Carlo simulation, it will tell you you will not be as effective as you could otherwise be. And that's the danger I think I see sometimes where we compartmentalize.
Beautifully put, Emily, and music to my ears, because that's one thing that I've seen over the years, this vertical silo of mental health being placed vertically in HR, DEI, D&I, whichever phraseology you want to use now, occupational health, rather than it horizontal through business. That's music to my ears. Go on, George.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say, I think on that, Emily, it's really interesting what you say. Do you think there's still a lack of education in a lot of organisations? Because and I say that from we still tend to focus on what's been delivered quite a lot, whereas I think the journey of how people get there, so thinking about people's mental health and where people get their energy from, it's around that collaboration and that relationship and interaction you have with other people in the team.
Yeah, I think that comes almost from the siloing. I think if you say that it is somebody's job to look after the mental health of an organisation, then you lose the collaboration, because it's like, right, there's a problem, that must be so and so. Oh, pick the phone up to X or Y. You push it away from you, and I understand them. Actually, people having mental health crises sometimes, or on the way to a crisis, it's hard. It's difficult to deal with. Emotions are difficult to deal with. What do you do? What do I do? Much easier to say it goes over there than to collaborate and say, what can we do? What as a group can we do? How can I lift you? How can I support you in this? How can I take away some of the stresses that are getting you to that place? Much easier to say, yeah, no, there's a number. There's a number on the back of the toilet door. Phone up and get some counselling. That is one of a number of things in the toolkit, and I think the collaboration gets lost if you rely on that alone.
And I think another point I'd like to make, that the answer to my own question is not enough, in my opinion, because I think what's happened is over the period of time, thinking about people when they hear the term mental health, quite often they will automatically defer to the negative end of the spectrum. So there's been a lot of work and a lot of focus on training and curative measures, the EAPs, and as you know, you both said, silo it in HR and occupational health and ER, rather than people thinking about what mental health is in terms of how it impacts business and productivity. And given as you just said, the inextricable link between our mental health and how we turn up, I'd just like to share something, if I can manage my technology. This is a schematic that I did, where for me, mental health is the heart of business, because all these things can be affected by our mental health, and all these things can affect our mental health. And to Emily's point, and I also think Dawn's point, and to Harpreet's point about, for example, how we are, if we've got stuff going on for ourselves, we could be uptight, irritable, perhaps a bit short-tempered, a bit grumpy. So then someone asks us a question, we're a bit snappy. And in that, someone's perception of that is, for example, I'm being bullied. And it's not that. It's just that the other person has got some stuff going on for them. And rather than having that conversation or understanding what mental health is and its effect on our physiology, how we turn up, a better collaborative and understanding about that. And to your point, Dawn, I don't think, quite frankly, enough has been done in workplaces to educate people as to what mental health is, because a lot of it has been at the less productive end of the spectrum rather than the end of the spectrum we're talking about here. And this is why it's music to my ears for Emily, from a risk management point of view, because we can have great business, if we sort of blend that in then to mental health as a people risk factor, and that's what's coming through here, that yes, it is, and it's more than just that end of the spectrum. We can have great businesses and great products and policies and procedures and premises and everything else, but at the end of the day, it's people that make that happen. And if they're not fully functioning, and as I think, as we just touched on, organisations can spend billions on all these things. But
Can I add one thing to that?
Yeah,
so you mentioned a really good scenario, which I'm sure we've all experienced, where you go to speak to somebody and they snap at you. And I think it's really making allowances, for people's mental health, and they might not be having a good day. And I think the worst thing that can happen from situations like that is where you label that person as that type of character. And I've seen it so many times, like I've worked with people that were, inverted commas, difficult, but when you get under it, you realize why they're difficult. Certain circumstances that they've been through has made them the way that they are. And I truly believe nobody's a bad person. We all try our absolute best. I don't think nobody intends to come to work to make somebody else's life miserable. And it's really, we mentioned the word collaboration, working as a team. And we don't work in that sort of society anymore. If somebody's, a minor issue, we just get rid of them straight away. Companies don't operate like that. But what we need to do is come together as a team and say, well, how can we really get the best out of people? And at NatWest, the purpose is very clear. We champion potential, and we truly believe that every staff member has that potential. And you can't talk about potential without talking about mental health, because to truly fulfill your potential, you need to have that support when it comes to mental health.
And I think, go on, Dawn, go on.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thanks, Sylvia. I was just going to say, I think to that point as well, we don't always invest. We invest huge amounts of money within organizations that we probably all work within, where we do, you know, really great recruitment drives, and we talk about mental health at a point in which we offer people positions. And I think there's probably a gap where we don't invest enough in that whole, you know, what does it look like when somebody joins? How do we make sure that we are talking about it and we're changing you know, the behaviours around it, and we're not just ticking a box to say we've got a mental health, you know, charter when people join that we take people through. I think there's a, you know, I'm not one for ticking boxes, and then that's where the culture change and the behaviour change within organisations really needs to take a step forward, doesn't it, to really just support that when people are in the organisation, I think.
I totally agree, and that thing around behaviours, I think a lot of the time we can, you know, a lot of organisations, dare I say, play lip service. You know, we have all these wonderful things, but does that actually flow through to what we do on a day-to-day basis? You know, Harpreet was talking there about labelling. You know, someone can be labelled, oh, he's grumpy, or she's grumpy, or they are this and they are that, rather than getting underneath, to Emily's point about the collaborative approach, as to find out what is really going on. You know, conduct risk has been getting increased coverage in the UK from various regulatory boards. And a lot of that was post 2007, 2008, and people's conduct in the finance industry. Now, and there's a lot around that, you know, going back to that schematic I've got there, you know, our mental health is important, because if we're not fully functioning, business is at risk from poor decision making, wrong choices, badly managed crises. You know, we can only look at the pandemic to see which organisations may have fared better than others, and those missed golden opportunities. You know, to Emily's point, from a risk management point of view, we might have a fantastic deal that comes along and someone turns it down because they think, oh, can't be asked, can't be bothered, or there may be the one that I say yes to and it's an absolute no-no. In talking about, to Harpreet's point, resentments can build up, someone's behaving in a certain way, and also can have far-reaching implications, not to actually health and safety of employees, and in certain businesses and sectors, for example, oil and gas, mining, construction, lives as well. If someone hits the wrong button at the wrong time, makes the wrong decision, we can have life lost. And of course, there's litigation, as I mentioned, resentments, and of course the implication that on organisations themselves, reputation, their brand, stakeholder and customer confidence. That might then mean jeopardising their ability to hire the best talent, increase training costs because they can't hire the best talent. And it just rumbles on and on and on as to why mental health is a people risk, in my opinion. And I sense Emily sort of on the same sort of path too. And this, why it should, in my opinion, sit horizontally across organisations. And to Dawn's point about the behaviour around that, which sort of brings us neatly onto what is the role of an organisation's culture with regard to mental health. But what do we understand by the word culture?
That's the response I was going to kind of give before you even asked that question. We're on the same wavelength here. We're on the same frequency. I was going to delve into the word culture, right? Because it's huge, and every year, you know, I come across it, and I'm always having these huge debates about it. So, like, just taking out workplace and mental health, culture for me is sort of all the things that people did before me, right? So my parents, grandparents, and I think for the longest time, I used to believe that my culture was very sort of rigid and this sort of torch that parents just passed on, right? But what I'm learning now is culture is actually very fluid, in the sense that when they do pass it on to me, you know, we have to sort of mold with the times, because culture isn't going to be that one static thing that, you know, one size fits all for every generation for the rest of time. A society has changed so much in the last 50 years compared to the last 5,000 years. You know, we know that we can't just hold on to that culture. And I'm fortunate enough to join a bank when the culture had started to change. But I'm sure everybody's read the newspapers, seen documentaries. Banking culture back in the day was very one way, very sort of a high power, you know, get the money, forget everyone else. But now that culture is slowly changing, and that's, you know, what I meant by fluid, in the sense that we all are part of this, right? Every time I enter an environment, a space, I am contributing to that culture. And for me, the biggest mistake you can make in terms of culture is thinking that only one way of thinking is right. It's worked for us in the past, it's going to work for us going forwards. That is a recipe for disaster. And NatWest has really understood that, well, actually, we're not denying the past in the sense that what's happened has happened. We understand where we are now, and we have a chance to shape the future. So it's on us to make the right decisions going forwards. And so that's where mental health comes into it as well. If you're really trying to shape the future generations and create that culture where they can thrive during a sort of generation which is now struggling a lot with their mental health because of the forever changing environments that they're in, if mental health isn't on the agenda, then that culture isn't fit for purpose, in my opinion, right? Because, you've kind of ignored it's coming back to sort of being reactive and proactive. So obviously, Emily can vouch for any risk model, right? You don't just wait for something to happen and then decide to fix it. You have to preempt things, and it's never been clearer now that the biggest issue facing generations going forwards is going to be mental health in the workplace. So that culture needs to be comfortable enough to sort of, wrap your arms around these staff members if they are struggling, and make them feel like they have a place where they can speak and get the help that they need. I think Dawn mentioned, when staff first join, that's one part of the coin. The other part of the coin is the staff that are there and they've been there for a while, because such are habits and behaviors and cultural habits and behaviors. It's like an elastic band. You can stretch it, but then eventually it's just going to go back into itself, right? So really having the conversations like these, for me, what it's doing is it's constantly stretching that elastic band to a point where it's probably not going to go back to the way it was before.
I love that metaphor of the elastic band. Has anyone else got some ideas on culture?
I think culture is just a physical manifestation of what an organisation says it wants to be, and for me, and to your question about what is the culture that fosters good things, I guess for me it's about safety. A business should provide a safe environment for its employees to do the business it's there to do. If you provide a safe environment for people to express the state of their mental health, I'm having a bad day, I'm not being very productive today, without recrimination, that is a positive workplace culture. As long as, again, it's a two-way discussion. It's okay, well, what can we do? How can we help you get into a better place? What's going on? What other factors are there that we might be able to help you with? You turn up to work, you get paid for doing the work, and it is an exchange. It's it's a deal you make with an employer. But I think it's more than just the money. I think we give a lot of ourselves to our employers. I mean, almost more so through the pandemic. For those working at home, nobody's told me their days have got shorter or their lives have become less stressful as a result of it. We give a lot to our employers. We give more time to our employers than we do to our home lives and our families in many cases. And that's part, for me, of the compact of an employer-employee relationship in terms of mental health and culture, is having that level of safety and providing somewhere that you don't have to put on a mask, you don't have to put on some sort of different costume to pretend everything's okay. Because I can tell you, again, of course, from my own experience, for 35 years of my life, wearing a disguise effectively, I know how much of my mental capacity was tied up with that. And I think for people with poor mental health, whether it be caused by work or by other factors, if they feel they have to put on that disguise that everything's okay, I'm productive, I'm great, everything's fine, I know what that can do to people, and it can drive you into the worst possible places. And that, for me, that's the compact between the employer and the employee, is to say, we'll give you that safety.
And I wonder whether on that, Emily, I wonder whether there is, that's just made me think about something, because I think, and this is where there's a disconnect between sort of massive corporate organisations versus probably some of the smaller organisations, because I think, to your point, Sylvia, about a happy worker is a productive worker, or however you phrase that, I really, really agree with that as well. And I think, for me, and I appreciate this might be quite a naive view, but if you get the people bit right and you have a workforce who are engaged, who are happy, who feel supported with their mental health, the business results in reality should follow, because people's performance gets to a place where they feel they can come to work and do their best. And I appreciate in reality that doesn't always happen, but I wonder if there is a narrative that we need to try and change within. It really is about the people, and if you get that bit right, a lot of the other things will follow by default.
I think there is an element for that, and to all your points, I think one of the things that I've been hearing recently around culture is the phrase, it's the way, what and how we do things round here, i.e. Mars might do it their way, NatWest will do it their way, HSBC will do another way, you know, Fred Blogs down the road, they'll do it their way. And that will be different in all organisations. But it generally means, which I think is coming through, is about our behaviour. And so culture and behaviour is very much entwined, and they drive each other. But, you know, to your point, is that consistency of behaviour. And I think if we understood more about mental health and how it affects the individual, regardless of the business angle, then perhaps people would take more notice of its importance. I've got some stats here. Someone said to me the other day, recent research shows that those that invest in mental health and wellness have 12% increase in productivity. Now, if they increase in productivity, it means they're more motivated, they are happier. And I think what's also been backed up is from a mental health, from an HR expert, global expert. He said mental health is not an HR issue. It's a business issue. And we should be taking a holistic approach. There are some organisations that do, and I know that some organisations don't. But I think to all your points, there is something about safety. There is something about safety. And one of the phrases that's coming up a lot at the moment is psychological safety. And I looked at the other day, it says, where we can show and employ oneself without fear of negativity or consequences of self-image, status and career, a shared belief that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, i.e., you know, it is about being safe at work. And I think we as individuals have a duty of care to our fellow employees, but also to all your points that the employer has that duty of care to realise that it's about the employee too, the safety, and it's okay to speak up on whatever thing we might want to speak up on. I'm just a bit conscious of the time. We've got about 3 minutes left, but has anyone got any sort of like closing thoughts around this topic?
Yes, just a few thoughts from myself. So obviously we spoke quite a lot about, you know, mental health in the business, risk and things like this. One thing that a visual that popped up to my mind is all those learning modules that you do. So you do health and safety and they say, oh, there's a live electric wire here. What do you do? And one of the options is walk away. And then another one, oh, Steve has put £60,000 down his trousers. What do you do? One of the options is walk away. And I was thinking, sometimes we're faced with those type of scenarios when it comes to mental health as well. Like one of your colleagues is having a bad day. What do you do? And how many of us opt for the option to walk away? And one sort of note I want to leave it on is that sort of mental health isn't contagious. So if somebody's going through depression, you're not going to catch it by sitting next to them. You know, if somebody's going through anxiety, stress, bipolar disorder, it's not something that you can just pick up like that, right? So have that sort of strength to engage with that colleague and support them. You know, the collaboration was one of the words we used. If we do it together as a team, and if businesses really promote that culture where you can talk to one another and managers and vice versa. So Emily mentioned it earlier, you know, looking out for your managers as well. The more we do that, the better the culture will eventually become and safer it will be in the workplace.
Thank you, Harpreet. We've got 2 minutes left for you,
I just say very quickly, just be human.
Yes.
Don't forget your humanity when you're coming to work and doing business. It's an obvious point. If you are in an environment where you feel supported, where you are supportive of others, you will deliver more. That is not uncontroversial. And that stems from your humanity. That stems from empathy and understanding and just being a human being. And we can all be human beings because I know we all are. That's one of the few things that absolutely unites us. And that's the only thing I'd say. The business stuff, that's the stuff you get out of the back end of it. That's the result. It starts with humanity. That's
like the secondary gain, isn't it? The business results of the secondary gain. Beautifully put, Emily. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just to wrap up from me, I think if you invest in your people, in making them feel valued, looked after, you know, all of that softer stuff that maybe isn't as measurable from a business point of view, I think you will absolutely reap the reward. So when we talk about value creation, it may not be a hard, fast measure, but I think the value those people will add if they feel supported, you will get back in tenfold.
And I think picking up on that point, for me, value isn't always in pound notes or dollars or renminbi or euros. Value can be in so many different currencies. So thank you very much for your contribution today. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I look forward to the next one and seeing you all again soon. Thank you very much indeed.